Hello, friends. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's MAI webinar, Revisiting Digital Publishing Options. We are happy to see 51 participants from 20 countries registered to join us on this interesting discussion on going digital. My name is Ramon Rocha from Media Associates International. It is our honor and privilege to have two distinguished guests in our panel today. Carlo Carrenho is a publishing consultant, a book trade specialist, and a journalist. He's from Brazil, but now resides in Sweden. Currently, he works for Word Audio Publishing International Sweden, which publishes audiobooks. And in his LinkedIn profile, Carlo said, he's Brazilian born, global made, and Swedish defined. What a tagline, Carlo. Greet our audience.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here. So my greetings from cold Stockholm. The winter arrived today, basically. So we got -2 this night. So I'm already looking forward to the next summer. But hi to everyone here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Our second panelist is Werner. He is the founder of Audiobooks. He's been publishing and producing audiobooks since 2003. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you're based in San Diego, California.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, and welcome. Let's get started. Digital publishing has been around for some time now. From my little Google research, it was in 2007 when Amazon's Kindle was released in the market. With regards audiobooks, 2009 was the year when digital downloads surpassed CDs as the most popular audiobook format. Sales figures in 2019, almost $2 billion worth of ebooks were sold in 2019, and around $1 billion worth of audiobooks were sold last year. But these sales figures were mostly coming from the West. When ebooks was being introduced, it was predicted that it signaled the death of printed books. Well, in 2020, in the developing world, print is still king. In fact, Gladys Doronila of OMF Literature in the Philippines said they thought their ebooks will significantly increase during the pandemic. Apparently, it did not. People still bought printed books in the Philippines, that is. So, print still dominates the sales of Christian materials in the developing world. So why go digital? Why publish ebooks? Why publish audiobooks? Is it worth the investment? Carlo, can you please start off our discussion?
Yes. So I like your question. And I think I always believe that the Christian world should be more digital than the rest, because I believe that digital books are all about access. And of course, you need a device to read, but the truth is you can read in your computer. And in some third world countries, most people actually have a compatible device. So if you go to my home country, Brazil, everyone has they might not have a refrigerator, but they'll have a mobile phone that will allow you to read. And why is it important? I think we have a call as Christian publishers to spread the message. So the more access we give, the better. And I think ebooks give geographical access. So again, using my own country as an example, it's a lot easier to send books to Amazon digitally, where you have mobile phones, and then actually send print books to the middle of the forest. And they also give economic access because they are cheaper to produce, and therefore they should be cheaper to sell. And in the beginning, they were not, but now they are. And also, they provide access for the visual impaired. So if you're blind, today you have machines that can easily read an ebook. Or if you have any other form of difficulty to read, usually ebooks can be easily adapted for these people. So if you have a call to spread the Christian message, I think we should really fight for access. So yes, I think it's always time to go digital because of that.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. There's a lot of convenience in reading materials, content through ebooks. What about audiobooks, Corey? How would you argue on producing audiobooks, given people still prefer print?
I think a lot of publishers have been surprised by the growth in audiobooks. Our industry, the audiobook industry, is kind of a fast-moving, fast-paced kind of thing. I started a company with a partner in 2003 called Christian Audio, and we focused on Christian audiobooks. And when we started, the market was 95% cassette tapes. And then 2 years later, the message at the Audiobook Publishing Association was, remainder all your cassettes are dead. You know, basically CDs are the only thing you can sell in retail, which was of course how you made money back then. You sold a physical product in retail. And so we were always kind of looking ahead. Our first sale in 2003 was a download, 2004, when the download market was a fraction of 1%. We just knew that ultimately things would move. So we started with CDs and then in downloads, but it did take a long time. A lot of publishers were audio publishers were surprised the market didn't grow more quickly. And, but it was very, very slow to grow, primarily due to factors that don't exist today. Like you really didn't have a good delivery mechanism. It was very difficult to get the content. There was initially DRM and some other factors that really inhibited the growth, but that's all of those are sort of gone. But if, why audio now at this time? I mean, I think, it's probably a longer conversation than an hour, but I'll start with, reading has incredible competition. 2003, I went to my first ICRS conference when ICRS was huge and you'd have to, spend hours walking it and people had 2-story booths and things. And I remember on the plane ride looking around, I was getting into audio and seeing that everyone was reading books and people were doing crossword puzzles and whatever, but, no one was listening to anything and it was a little discouraged, And fast forward now, if you go to a conference, essentially, you won't see almost any print books on the plane. I mean, you might see a couple. You'll see a lot of digital screens, a lot of movie watching. So there's just, when you think about the amount of things you can do, it's a long list between Netflix or gaming or checking email or work or, on and on and on. So audio is one of those things where when you're doing something where you can't do anything else, you can multitask. So ultimately, we're drawing in a lot of new users because of that, because people have a high perceived value of reading. And so more and more people are saying, I want to read, especially young people like millennials. I want to read books because I think they're going to help me, but I just don't have the time and I'm completely distracted. So people say when they're, the main reason the main time that people say they listen is when they're relaxing at home. We see this show up a lot in our sales surveys that we do. And what people are saying is when I'm going to sleep or when I'm taking a walk or washing the dishes or walking the dog or driving dropping the kids off at at school, that's when I'm listening. So it's when I'm doing something I can't do anything else. So there isn't that competition that you have with print. I think Carlo mentioned some other, important things like digital will be more profitable ultimately. You make the product once and it's sort of found money, right? It's a passive revenue source. But ultimately I think you want to do audio because people want it. 50% of people in the US market have listened to an audiobook, but more telling is that half of those people that have listened to a book in the last 6 months. So it's a very, very sticky format because of this idea of multitasking. And so we're just bringing in many, many new readers. And if you look at demographics, young people are listening at alarming rates. The under 40 crowd is listening to high percentages are listening to 20 books a year. So there's a lot of volume as well. So those are some reasons. I guess the last reason I'd say of why is there's an audio first crowd. About 20% of the Christian market in the US wants audio as their first format, meaning if they go to look for a book, they look for audio first.
That's the US. Again,
I understand.
yeah. So, so you are foreseeing a change in the reading habits or listening habits of people. They don't have the time to read, but they have time to listen while they're doing other tasks, or driving, or running, or walking. So you see that even in the developing world, people will do that eventually. Is that
I think one of the challenges is to say that we don't have a lot of audiobook sales. You have to really look at your market. The Christian market had very few audiobook sales when we started, but we didn't have a lot of content. So people essentially you train your customer base or your readers to think that audio won't exist for their products. If there are very few titles in a language, or this is the case in Spanish a few years ago, there were almost no titles in Spanish that were commercially available. But now the publishers have been really, really pushing on and putting a lot of volume in terms of Spanish content. And that market is really waking up, and the growth is starting to, the growth trajectory is really, really looking up now.
So it's giving more offerings to the market, expanding your line, and also doing a lot of marketing and educating the market. That is included in the rise of digital. You would say that?
I think that's fair to say. You have to, educating the market, or just people have to sort of think that there's going to be, in the US market, obviously the market is growing double digits and has been for 7 years. But that's because when you think about, you think about a book, it's available. Most books are available in audio, e and print. So you kind of have a choice. Whereas in other markets, that certainly isn't the case. And so I remember we had a long battle of making people aware that books were available, because we had produced 2,500 Christian books, and we wanted people to know that all these great titles were available. And most people I talked to said, I didn't even know that, these books were available in audio. I had no idea. That was the conversation that we had. It was very common to have that kind of a reaction from someone.
I like what you said, that it's a one-time investment, and the income will just come in and flow in. It's a passive income, but you have to do a lot of marketing as well. I mean, you creating it and making sure that you inform the people that it's available on ebook and audiobook. So that is an incentive.
Ramon, if I can,
Carlo?
If I can make just going back a little bit, if I can make a comment. Yes, this development is being seen in the US a lot for audio, but in Europe it's also big. And you have a company, a Swedish company called Storytel, that's present now in 20 markets. And the last places they opened shop was Mexico, Colombia, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So, those guys are not going there to lose money. So, Indonesia is a huge market, and I think audio really could work there. Owns these retailers and these platforms put up their shops there. So just a comment that I think it's arriving already to some third world places.
Okay. Yvette asked quickly, what is the name of the company again? The Swedish company?
Storytel. Storytel.
Okay.
Tel, yes.
Yes, thank you.
They are basically in lots of countries except the English word. So.
Mm-hmm. You have some trends and you have some slides to show, Carlo. I think that would be a good time to show it.
Okay. All right, I prepare something. I hope it's not too boring. My idea is just to show some reports that are available there and to provoke a little bit. So I'll share my screen here. Wait a minute. There you go. So there is a company in.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. there is a company in Germany called Bookwire. They are an aggregator of digital content, ebooks and audiobooks, and they do some very interesting reports. So all these reports are from this year, and they are free. You can just go there and access. And I just made a quick selection of some facts to share here, but the reports are a lot larger, okay? One is the Digital Consumer Book Barometer, okay? So one of the things they try to show in this report, among others, is that how it's important to set the right price and how pricing makes a difference for ebooks. So here you have some stats from Brazil, because they're present in Brazil. And here you see the price getting more and more expensive as you go to the right. And of course, by volume, the cheaper it is, the more you get, you know? So you have all these books. It's interesting that books sold by 0.99, they get even more downloads than books that are free, because I think people see some value in it, I don't know. And then if you go by revenue, you see that most revenue in Brazil comes from books between around €5 or €6, okay? But the lesson here is to see that price really can make a difference. If you go to Spain, of course, being in Europe, this is what happens by volume. So until it's €10, it doesn't really change that much. But then when you go to the revenues you get from books, when the book is around €8, it's where you get the most revenues. Of course, the book is very expensive, you don't get much. And if it's zero, you don't get anything. So that's a report.
Excuse me, Carlo.
Sure.
That is a very important aspect there, that pricing it right. So what is the guideline? How much, say your book is available in print and also in ebook? How would you price, if you cannot afford to price it at 99 cents, how would you price
well, first,
compared to your
you might laugh, but when ebooks started, that happened. First, it should be cheaper than the print edition. And I'm not joking, because in some places it was even more expensive. Usually, I did some calculations. I think you can easily charge 40% cheaper as a cover price or something like that.
40% cheaper than the print.
Yeah, you're probably gonna have the same profit, but you should watch your market. And Amazon did experiment a lot, and they did some stuff which was to put down the price of the book as a promotion just for a week or just for a day. And then they go back with the price, and that gives a push, you know, that at the end of the day, you sell lots of books also in the regular price. So price can be a very effective marketing tool. So it's hard to give a receipt for all the countries. So you need to see what's going on in your country. But no, maybe it's worth to try to sell it very cheap for a while if you have a good platform like Amazon or Google or Kobo in your country. I think it's always interesting to use price as that. So ebooks are very price sensitive. So if you put a book that's too expensive, people won't buy it. And of course, if you put it too cheap all the time, you're gonna sell a lot, but not get much money. So in Spain, between €7 and €9 is there where you can get more money out of it. In Brazil, it's a little bit cheaper. I think depends on the development of the country, could be more expensive or cheaper. But you really need to try to find what is going to be the best price for you. And it's try and learn. No, you're going to make mistakes, but you should try. Yes. Yeah. But, you know, try and error with digital is fine. Try and error with print is complicated because then you've got all the print there. So, you know, you can afford to play a little bit on digital.
Yeah. Before you continue, thank you for that, Carlo. What about audiobooks, Corey? How do you price? What is a good, how do you price your audiobooks compared to your print book?
You're
on mute, Corey. Unmute yourself.
All right, sorry about that. My screen got in a little bit of a weird state. So can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I won't mute myself again. Yeah, pricing is similar. Audiobooks are very price sensitive. We see that, the subscription model sort of historically has dominated the market, and the pricing for US pricing would be say $9 to $14 a book. But say on average, just say $12 or something would be the subscription price, depending on how many you're getting a month. But we've done a lot of experimentation and found that price point of about $7 is sort of your sweet spot. There are new channels that are experimenting with low cost a la carte pricing and seeing really, really significant volume. And those prices are 99 cents to say $3.99. And then of course we have a very large library market. So digital library prices for the library can vary from, a couple of dollars a listen up to very expensive. So pricing's sort of all over the place, but I would say that there's two types of consumers: someone who just has a subscription and they're just getting regular books. The other type of person is someone who wants an a la carte purchase and they're really price sensitive.
Okay, you mentioned about subscription model. So is that the rising way of consuming audiobooks? You have to subscribe to a service you pay on a monthly basis. Is that how you go about it?
That's been the dominant sort of pricing model. I don't know that will be, so far that's been how the majority of people consume audiobooks in the US, but I think it's changing. We have a lot of growth in other markets. We're seeing, we obviously have a lot of books that one has published, and we're looking at those numbers very carefully, and we're seeing a lot of growth in library market. And so it takes time, right, for things to move, and the subscription has been kind of the way that people consumed audiobooks up to now.
Okay.
I think Ramon, there is this Netflix
Yes.
influence also. I mean, subscription is not just for books. Subscriptions are coming in several areas, and people really got used to that. So in Europe, Storytel and other platforms are all you can eat models. It's very hard to make that work and make sure the author, the publisher, and everyone gets paid. Okay. So I think this model is very tough. I hope it succeeds, because if you found a way to make it succeed, it will be, again, bring more access to people. So it's great. So I'm kind of a big fan, but I know it's hard. And eventually we might go into limited kind of subscription models, like Audible, for instance, in the US, where you can just listen to 1 or 2 books a month. But it's interesting that Audible just launched it in Spain last month. And in Spain, they made a subscription model that you can listen as much as you want for a huge part of their catalog. So I think subscriptions are here to stay. The subscription model is the thing that's gonna, that people, the market will have to solve it a little bit. And all these platforms, by the way, they have audio and digital and ebooks. They have both. So
they have both. I
Carlo,
read the article. Yes, Corey?
I was just going to say, Carlo brings up an important point that, ultimately, where things will probably go is to an all-you-can-eat model. It's just that in our market, U.S. audiobook publishers and U.S. publishers have been resistant to that model, because audiobooks sort of grew up right around the time that the music all went to streaming and all-you-can-eat models, and it sort of killed the industry. So I think people have been really concerned about moving that way, because you see that the revenues are more uncertain. But I think ultimately that's where things will go. As we talk about future trends here coming up, that's going to be one of the major trends for sure.
So let's make that clear again. All-you-can-eat model. So a consumer will pay a fixed monthly price, and then you can consume as much as you can, ebook or audiobook, given that price. Is that the eat all you can smorgasbord kind of a model?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So it's kind of the Netflix model, pretty much.
I see.
So in Europe, it's very, very common, and it's growing a lot.
And how do you pay the publishers then? So you pay a company like Netflix a fixed amount of monthly price.
I'll
and
let Corey explain this.
It's up to them. I mean, how do you?
No, not really. You go ahead. You want to explain that, Corey?
Well, I was going to say, yeah. So the publisher base, and this is not a common model in the U.S. right now. Most of the publishers don't accept this model. Most audio publishers.
Okay.
But the premise is that you take a portion of the revenue, say half the revenue or 40, 50% of the revenue, and you divide that evenly based on usage or based on clicks or some kind of metric. So if someone clicks on the book, or if they use the book, or if they use a portion of the book, you'll look at that, and then you'll divvy up whatever money you're going to give out between the publishers based on that usage. But there's not one way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
quite complicated.
And people get. I work with platforms all over the world, and people can get really creative in the models they use. For Word Audio, we are an audiobook publisher. We just say, let's just try everything. So just sign the deal. If it doesn't work, we give up later. But sometimes, honestly, I don't even really know exactly how they're doing that. But let's see what the revenue is, and then you just calculate how much you're getting per book sold, or we can have an idea and compare to other platforms. So some of them can get really complex, but basically you divide the pie. That's it.
Basically divide the pie. Actually, I read an article that the future trend is going to be that way. Most of our lives will be on subscription. I mean, everything.
Yes, in Sweden, they have this company now. They have cars by subscription, so you don't own the car anymore. So yeah. So I think it's a tendency, a trend that's coming. But what I'd say to people don't be afraid of this new crazy model. Just read the contract, and it's a little bit weird in the beginning. You get to it, and that could be quite interesting. And you have to understand this is another kind of economics. If you try to fit the audio and digital book models into the print model you've been working all your life, it's not going to work. So you have to kind of having two separate ways of thinking. And what matters at the end of the day is the bottom line, if you're having a profit, and for a Christian non-profit, if the books are being scattered around. So I think you need to focus more on the results and learn as you go in these new different models. It's a challenge, absolutely.
It's a challenge. I heard somebody say that a publisher say that we will produce, of course, we're producing print books, but we will produce ebooks as well, just in case the market shifted to ebook, at least we're there. Is that a healthy attitude, or you're not really very
yes and no?
What do you say?
No, if the attitude is okay. No, if the attitude is, I hope the books are not going to succeed. I hope because I love print so much, so I don't want the books to succeed. So that's a bad attitude, because I think people should reach that all kinds of platforms to spread literature should succeed. So I'll give you a personal example. Corey is going to laugh on this. I cannot listen to an audiobook. I work in an audiobook publisher, and I hate it. For me, myself, Carlo, I can't. I get distracted. I get completely distracted, and I cannot listen to it. But there is a market, and I'm working hard, and I'm involved in projects in Brazil and Russia and Spain to bring this content the way that lots of people that are not me want this book. So I think that should be the approach that any publisher should have. But that's also a very good approach, and that's a question that we were discussing before, because the cheapest way to produce an ebook is to produce it together as you do the print book, all right? So you don't have to convert later. You call a typesetter, or you go to a guy that do the typesetting of the book and say, oh, by the way, I also need the ebook. He's not going to charge much more for that, and maybe he won't charge. You're negotiating the contracts. Oh, by the way, I need the book version as well. You can do that at the same time. So then you can easily, if you do at the same time, you're gonna have the ebook produced almost for free. While if you wait another year, then you have to find the cover that you lost and the contract, I don't know what it is, and then you forgot to talk to the agents, and then it becomes this little nightmare to convert. So I think you should do, especially ebooks at the same time. Of course, audiobooks are another story because it's a different production, but ebooks and print books are pretty much in the same pipeline. So
That's very important what you said, Carlo, because you can set up your ebook at the same time as you're producing your print. So it's just a matter of your final PDF. The output is one is for print and one is for ebooks. So you have to make sure that your production.
yeah, even EPUB. But even if you typeset the book right, you can export as EPUB, not just PDF. And it's going to be very simple to do at the same time.
Okay.
But, and very complicated to do it later.
The program that you use is InDesign?
Yeah, InDesign exports to EPUB.
Okay. Okay, so publishers, writers, please use InDesign or your typesetter, your book designer.
Yeah, or the other, I mean, you can, it's more about the production process.
Okay.
You can do it together.
Yes.
Because then if you only have a PDF, then things get complicated. But.
Okay, thank you. What about audiobooks, Corey? Is there a better way to produce it?
Carlo makes a great point. I mean, if you can build in processes, you know, to basically create multiple formats at once, it is a little trickier with audio. What I would say with audio is, and this is sort of was my approach since the beginning, because when we started, audio was less than 1% of the market in terms of sales. It was like about half of 1% of the market. But yet we were publishing several hundred books a year. So of course we were really playing the long game. So I think for publishers, you need to look out and be confident of where this is going. Focus on your top titles, focus on your trade titles, focus on titles that you know you can make work. And you know, get creative. Use the audio outside of just selling it. Use it for review copies to get people to review the book on various platforms. Give the audio to influencers so that they can tell people you know, about it. So you know, audio is a lot of, we find that a lot of leaders listen to audio. A lot of you know, we find that was what our initial market we went after was pastors, because we found that they needed to read a lot of books, so they listened to a lot of books. So we focused on the pastor market for the first 5 years because you know, they were more apt to buy an audiobook, and I think that's helpful because you get the book into the hands of an influencer who's going to tell other people about it. So I think you've got if you just look at this and say, well, it's a small market. And I don't think we can make money. That is one aspect of the decision-making process, right? You got to make money. But the other aspect is, you know, things Carlo's been talking about, where it's like, you know, what are we really doing this for, right? We're trying to disseminate this important content that we pour our lives into that are ultimately going to change people's lives through the gospel. So there's that, and a percentage of, you know, and then it's about thinking long-term, where when this comes, when the market shift happens in your market, like it did in ours, where it went from basically 0 to 5 very quickly, 5 to 10 pretty quickly. And now you have certain types of content. Like if you're targeting content at millennials, you might sell 30 to 50% of your sales will be in unit sales. And Carlo and I were talking before, and he was telling me that in Sweden, the numbers are like 50% of the fiction is consumed in audio. So, you know, these trends happen, you know, did I get that right, Carlo?
Sorry, yes, 50% of trade fiction is consumed in audio in Sweden in units, not revenues, but units.
Yeah, in units. The same thing here, we're talking about units and revenue differently. So 30 to 50% of the unit sales at books targeted at millennials will be in audio. So we're seeing similar pockets here, but the point is that before you get to the point where audio is 20% of your market, have your top titles in audio, begin to let people know that you have this content available, and you know, start recouping on it, because over time you're going to recoup on these titles over time, and once they're paid for, it's found money.
That's a very good point, Corey. Have your top titles on audio. Use it not only for selling, but to give it to influencers like pastors who will eventually endorse your book. And because they don't have enough time to read, then they may have time to listen. Can you fast forward chapter, audiobook? Corey, can you fast forward from chapter 1 to chapter 5? On
Yeah,
listening
yeah.
to
You,
audiobook?
I mean, most of the apps. I mean, that's a complicated question because audiobooks, there's 50 places you can download and or get streamed audiobooks. But for the most part, most of these channels we sell into allow you to switch between chapters very easily.
Thank you.
But also, some people actually listen in the speed modes.
Absolutely.
So some people, it's very common, they listen 1.5 or 2 times faster.
Okay.
So like I do with Netflix sometimes too. It's too get boring. So yeah, so that's maybe an effect of the new world you live in. So basically you will listen to a book in 2 times the speed.
Assuming you can still comprehend.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, Corey, is there any other like new developments in producing audiobooks? Is it the same as getting a narrator, either finding other people to do it for you, or you do it yourself and then go to ACX or Authors Republic as your platform to distribute? Is that the best way up to now?
Well, there are new models coming online. So the U.S. market is a little bit challenging because obviously our costs are going up quite a bit. Customers in the U.S. demand very high quality for audiobooks. The costs are growing because we have a market that's growing. So it's supply and demand. We hire typically the best narrators out there, and so things are getting more expensive, and low cost options are difficult. But looking back many years ago when our market was new, I think getting creative is really the best way. I mean, I don't have yes, you still have to hire a narrator, you still have to record it, you have to edit it, you have to master it to Audible standards or to your distributor standards. But I would say no. What you have to do is just get creative, right? That may mean that may mean that you create your own studio. I've helped studios. I've helped people start studios so that they can, do this themselves. And, essentially you might hire internal staff or hire, contractors who could do the work and pay narrators hourly. I mean, we have a union here and other things that sort of limit our ability to do low cost productions in some cases, but globally you've got you can get creative and get these books in audio, but you do want a specialist. I mean, I think it's always helpful. Most of the US publishers hire consulting companies. For example, I work with probably most of the top, like 80% of the top, US Christian publishers to help them produce content, because they don't necessarily want to build a whole team to handle all of this. And so if you're doing author reads, it can be very complicated. If you're doing remote recordings or, different studios, using different studios all the time, this can get very expensive and it's very time consuming. So in the US, the trend has been to hire companies like us, like One, to manage all of the production and to do distribution. We actually are we work with, we do distribution as well, like Authors Republic and others. And so we can get your content everywhere. The difference with us is it's a Christian focus. So we're working very actively, with Christian companies to do promotions like Who Wrong or WTS Books or Faith Life or, CBD. CBD, we're still trying to get that online, but, we work kind of closely in the Christian market to try to get that content out there. So, that's a whole nother conversation. Do you want to go straight to Audible or use a distributor? There are pros and cons to each, which I'd be happy to discuss with anyone who's interested. But, I think the big thing is get creative, get a few titles out there, figure out a low-cost model. If you think that you're only going to sell a few hundred copies of this initially, or maybe 100 copies of it initially, get really creative and tell the narrator, we have a budget of $100 to do this because that's what we think we're going to get back, but we need to get these books out there. I mean, I would just encourage you just to figure it out. And again, when we did it, there was no market, and we spent a lot of years, a lot of lean years. But then, you know, about a decade in, everything got really easy because the market sort of caught up, and we had done all that hard work. And it was really good to be positioned like that. So I would encourage publishers to, like I said, play the long game and think about, how do I position myself now for 2 to 3 years from now when these things really start to catch up in my language or in my context.
Thank you. Get creative. If you can do it yourself, like a pastor from Cameroon has a very good voice, and he is using WhatsApp to distribute his audio devotionals. And he has a young man in his church who is a sound technician, who helps him put in music at the beginning and at the end. And he has a 10-minute devotional, and he sends it out to his people. And that's a making of an audiobook, although it's free.
Right.
Thank you.
Corey?
Yeah.
You make a good point, because traditionally the church and Christians, we have lots of audio content.
Yes.
That's not necessarily a book, but so sometimes we should be talking a little bit more about audio content and not exactly audiobooks, because the audio content, even at the platform at Audible, could be something that was maybe not a book, but a collection of sermons from a pastor that passed away, or I don't know. But there is lots of podcasts today, but there are lots of audio content there that doesn't come necessarily from a book. It is still good content, still reaching people.
Content.
So you need to be open-minded to that.
Yeah.
And some churches have been recording their pastors for years now. So they have so much content that maybe they should just put on Spotify and distribute it, because it can do it. So, Spotify, it works.
Great point, Carlo. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. So, but we still have to be thinking of quality, making sure that we're producing good quality material. Like, you have to find a quiet place or build a studio, as you said, Corey, or hire a production company who can do it for you. Again, cost is involved there.
I think you have to think about quality, but sometimes quality sort of paralyzes people from making a decision. If you got our pricing for producing here in the US with, US-based narrators, it's very expensive. So you'd think we could never make that, we could never recoup on that. And if you're, depending on what the language is and what the market looks like. So, I think the biggest thing is to grow your market, you need content that you can start to produce. So, people, when there isn't much available, will accept lower quality. Like when people really want to hear the author's voice, they're not looking for a professional narrator. They're looking to hear the author. So they'll accept lower quality in terms of maybe the author doesn't have perfect enunciation, but that's okay. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for the person who wrote the book to talk to you because they're the expert and they're passionate about the content and they know it best. And so that's what you're looking for, but you compromise on the quality. So look at your market and say, you want to get in a quiet space, you want to get a good recording, but these things aren't that difficult anymore. But your market at some point, as it grows, will demand high quality. So you have to always balance this idea of doing it. You don't want to have to remake everything once the market comes to you. So it's got to be at that level where it's good enough, but that to stand the test of time as well.
Very good. Very good point. Thank you. I think we can start answering our questions. We have people who have sent in their questions ahead of time. John Wessels from South Africa. I think we've answered some of these questions here. How important is the quality of an audiobook? Cody just talked about it. What comments do you have about translation into vernacular languages? South Africa has so many languages. Is it a matter of just doing an audiobook in one? Carlo, you found this question interesting. You might have an answer to John Wessels.
Yes, well, I found interesting what he mentioned about some languages that are very an oral tradition and not they basically almost don't exist in the writing form, the written form. So for this language, I think the audiobook could be very interesting, for instance.
Okay.
I think the decision between doing multilingual
Audiobooks.
books, audiobooks, or it depends a lot, because if everyone speaks English or Afrikaans, for instance, maybe you can have a more catalog if you have less languages, because the cost of doing one book in 11 languages is pretty much the same production cost of doing 11 books in just one language. So I think that's the part of the decision it should make. Another thing that really is important in some languages is the accent you choose. So at Word Audio, you operate in Spanish, and this is the eternal discussion if you should do in Spaniard Spanish from Spain or the neutral Spanish or whatever. But then, just like Corey said, when people want the book, they listen in any accent. So what happened to Spanish? It's a very good story. The US is more advanced, was more advanced in audiobooks. So when the Spanish market in Spain started to listen to audiobooks and Storytel, this company arrived there, most of the good bestsellers, all the bestsellers, were recorded in the US in a Latin American accent. And then they were made available in Spain. And people in Spain had only one option. Either you listen to Mexican Spanish or you don't. So they listened to Mexican Spanish, and that was fine. So just coming back to the quality issue a little bit, sometimes you just need to start doing it, and it's going to be fine. So, but the accent is an issue for big languages, depending on the countries. In Spanish, because so many countries speak Spanish, your accent is kind of linked to your nationality. So that becomes a big issue. And come on, you cannot listen to a Mario Vargas Llosa book with Argentinian accent or a Borges book with Spanish accent from Spain. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Joffen Bowie of the Philippines is asking about the difference between publishing magazines in digital and publishing books. Is that the same?
I think it's a little bit different because magazines today they tend to go online as websites and become more something related to news. So of course you have digital magazines, you can read PDFs of magazines on your tablet, but usually I think magazines go straight to be a website, while books are still digital books or pretty much a facsimile. So I think it's a different experience a little bit. We still have this belief that books are more eternal and they are forever, and magazines are more ephemeral. So maybe that's part of the reason.
It's part of it.
So I think it's a little bit different. But one big difference though, a book, if you get a long seller, as you say, a book can last forever. You can be in 20 years from now still selling the digital book or the audiobook. A magazine usually is more ephemeral and it's going to be dated.
Even so digital?
Yeah, because it tends to. Of course, you're talking about scientific journal less, but if you're talking news magazine, absolutely. So I think magazines are riskier than books to go digital.
Okay. So he's asking about digital website. How do you go more content? Share more content on your website, so you can use blogs, you can use videos in your website, right? For her to go more.
Yeah, social media also. Huh?
Social media as well. Yeah. Okay, let's see questions here from our audience. Marketing, what is your opinion about this? Is Yvette? What is your opinion about marketing approach regarding launching an ebook with a print book? Doing it at the same time or launching it separately? What or children's books, specifically children's books? What are your comments?
Yeah, I'm not a children publisher, so I think they know better than me. But I think it's interesting that for years we've been discussing launching the ebook after the print book. And Yvette's question is exactly the other way around. So something's changing already. It's a great idea, maybe, because you can say, publish the digital, get some interest, and then when you have the print, that's a nice gift, can work as a gift. So I think you can play around with the formats to, you know, to have a better presence and more attention in the market. I think this is a great idea. I think it's going to depend on the book, on the market, exactly. I think there is no right or wrong in this case.
With the pandemic.
But do all the formats. Do the formats. Yeah, well, with the pandemic in Brazil, with the pandemic, lots of companies went straight to digital now.
Digital.
And launched the digital and not the print or POD, print on demand. So
print on demand, yes. Thank you. Okay, we have some questions here. Is it best for the author to read his or her own book? We talked about this. Some people would prefer the author, to listen to the author, as Corey said.
I would say when you're starting out,
yes.
Ramon, that it's usually is easier. Let's not talk about best. Let's talk about the possibility of actually getting a book into audio. It's easier to use a professional narrator. Using author reads can be very, very challenging from a technical standpoint. In terms of the level of knowledge that your engineer will need to have in terms of the capture, and then the editing can be much more extensive, and even the mastering and a lot of the processing that has to go in to get a quality product. So I would say if you have a choice and you're just starting, you're trying to break in, I would find, you know, again, a good professional reader, and it will save you a lot of time and energy and money in post. Now in the US market, it's a much larger market. So it used to be 5 years ago that authors would almost never read their own book. And now I would say it's a huge trend, and many authors want to read their own book, and many are allowed to read their own book. We probably do, our company one does about 120, maybe more than 100 author reads every year we produce. They're very challenging. You're usually in a studio you haven't worked in. You're usually working with an engineer who doesn't do this kind of work every day, and they're working with talent who doesn't do this work every day. So it can be really tricky. I would say stick with the professional narrator when you're starting. If you're really trying to experiment and figure out the market, and you're trying to save costs and minimize potential headaches, that's what we did for the first 10, 15 years in our publishing life. We did not do a lot of author reads. And then about 5 years ago, I started just doing a lot of author reads because the market seemed like it could justify it.
Okay, thank you. Philip Morrison is asking about the typical cost of producing an audiobook.
I mean, it can be very expensive, as I said, in our market. $500, $800 a finished hour. So an average book might be $4,000 or $5,000. Wow. But if you look at what we're talking about here, I mean, you could produce a 6-hour audiobook in the several $100 range all in. I mean, if your editors are $8 an hour US and your talent will read for $15 an hour US, I mean, that's a totally different scenario than we have, right? I think talking about costs is sort of irrelevant in this conversation, you know, because it's going to be so specific to each country. I can talk about costs in the US, you know, and give a really extensive explanation of what the costs look like here for US publishers, but I don't really know that it's relevant.
What about getting the narrators from another part of the globe? Through Viber or through other websites?
Yeah. So again, in the US market, we're reluctant to do that. We use tried and true professional audiobook narrators. This is all they do. But I think that's a perfectly valid strategy for other markets because you don't have a base of professional talent and you don't have a market that's big enough to justify these productions. So I think that's ultimately, these sites like Upwork, and we don't use them. I never use Upwork or Fiverr or even ACX for any of our productions. We only use professionals. But in this context, I think it makes a lot of sense. I just can't speak to it because it's not something we do.
Okay. Again,
yes, Ramon,
yes,
in the case of Word Audio, we are a Swedish company with an office in Spain, and we hire a studio in Colombia who records it, and then it's edited back in Madrid, and eventually make this in that so-called neutral with Spanish that I don't really, we don't want to get in that discussion, but we actually do this all global thing because it's a language that is spoken somewhere else. Yes. So yeah, it works.
Okay, thank you. Ivanova from Cameroon, we have devices to read or listen to ebooks. Problem is most of us cannot buy or sell online because we usually use cash, no bank account. Is there another option concerning price issues, how to pay, how to collect? Any ideas, Carlo, from your experience?
It's a big challenge because basically the problem I understand from Cameroon is that e-commerce is not very well developed because it's all cash based. India has this challenge as well. It's very hard because you depend on having a platform that somehow could sell to these people. Of course, if you had a huge platform that would sell with cards on store that you can buy by cash and have a code and use it. So there is technology to get around this problem. But the thing is, you need to have a platform, a retailer interested in offering that to the local market. So it's a very big challenge.
Yeah, there is.
I don't know. I don't have
mobile money.
Yeah, if you can use mobile money, or okay, I'll give you an example. Some platforms, they have done a deal with telecom companies. So if you have a mobile phone, somehow you pay the mobile phone. It's prepaid, it doesn't matter, but you pay it. So some retailers that offer these subscriptions, you can pay the subscriptions with your mobile account, even with the prepaid amount. So that happens. But again, you need one of those retailers to be present in the local market. So you have technology and there is ways around it, but for digital, you're probably gonna depend on a local supplier of things. On the other hand, I don't know if she publishes in English or French. If she does the ebook, let's not talk about audiobook that are quite expensive, but if she does the ebook, she can then publish this book in French and English platforms around the world. And people in France, in the rest of the French world or in the English world, I don't know, she's English or French there in Cameroon, you could be selling this book not to your own market, but you could be, for instance, in Africa, if it's English, selling this book to South Africa. So that could be a way of bringing more access and profit also to the company to allow them to find other projects to do locally. So think globally. There are no more frontiers, no borders. If you publish in a big language, your market is huge. You know, I come from, my language is Portuguese. It's big, but it's just one country. But if you publish in French, English, and Spanish, you go digital, your market's a lot bigger.
Amen. Thank you so much for that. Well, thank you, Carlo and Corey. If we have more questions from the floor, from our audience, please ask them now. Use the Q&A to ask. But I think it's been an interesting discussion and very helpful. I think we've covered a lot of ground on digital. Covered pricing, production, educating the market, marketing. What else have we covered? Have we not covered, Carlo? Is there anything that we have not covered from your slide?
I think Corey could comment on this. I would love to hear his opinion. Corey, how important is it to make this huge productions on audio in your experience, like to make almost a radio soap opera? Or is that important? Does it make a difference? Or you just need a narrator? Could you comment a little bit on the level of, because you can spend the same money than a Hollywood movie in an audiobook if you want. Could you comment a little bit on that? And I just want to pick your mind on your experience. So
I'd be happy to. We're actually in the process of producing the Action Bible for David C. Cook with 8 narrators and basically fully soundscape. So let me just give you an example of a normal audiobook. We're recording 2 audiobooks in our studios today. This morning. They'll be here in about a half hour to our studios. 3 days of recording, a week of editing, mastering. We crank these through. We spent 6 months in pre-production just planning out what we were going to do.
Wow.
And then we spent a month recording. So these productions you're talking exponentially more expensive in terms of what it takes. And we haven't even talked about soundscaping, which to get all the sounds and music. So in our market, in the US market, those kind of productions are only done when they're well-funded. It's either a very large product like a Bible or something, or it's funded by a large company like Focus on the Family was doing a lot of those types of productions. But my understanding is they were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars per production, and these are 4 hours long. So it's not really realistic for most of us to do them. They're too time consuming, too expensive, and the market just isn't there to justify them unless you have some way to move tens of thousands of units. But what we found in the US market, so I can't really speak to other markets, but in the US market is that the sales, people that did multicast, say full cast productions like you're talking about with like a radio sort of theater production, would find that their sales, if they did a single voice narration, were not that much higher between 2 books. You do a multicast, you do single voice, the sales were higher for the single voice. It's like, how do you justify 10 times more expense for the same sales?
Great. It's great to hear that, because I wasn't there yet. My company here in Sweden, they did the same book. They did just one narrator, normal, and they need what they called, for market reasons, colorized audio, which was all this production. Yes, the narrator sold more.
Yeah.
And I'm talking the platform, so no price, just people listen to it. And sometimes when I think about that, they just made a research here in Sweden about asking people why they listen to audiobooks. And I think the second reason that people said the most was to have company, not to feel alone.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
Let me say one caveat. There's one caveat to your question, and that is children's books. I think the future of children's book is multicast, because you've got a 30-minute, a 15-minute product. And ultimately, when you're experiencing that product with all of that soundscaping with the print book, so we're combining multi-formats with audio and, with the ebook, that is going to be a huge market. It's small now, but my prediction, we're experimenting in that market. And I think down the road, that will be a very important market. And I think that multicast will be the key to, I'm consulting with a girl right now who's starting a company doing multicast production. She's working with big publishers. So I do a lot of consulting. If you ever have any questions, if anyone ever has questions for me, I'd be happy to give you a few minutes on the phone, answer some questions. I realize how hard it is when you start in a new market. I've been through it. It's very discouraging at times. So if you need a little encouragement, I do think long-term, it's a great thing to do. Audio it continues to be more important every day. And I think it will be in your market. And so it's worth doing, but it's going to be challenging when you start. So feel free to, Ramon, if you want to put my contact information out there after this, I'd be happy to.
Yes, I'll share your email address with our participants. Thank you. Thank you for making yourself available to answer their questions.
Same thing here, Ramon. It'd be a pleasure
thank you, Carlo.
To brainstorm, to find a solution in Cameroon. That would be a great challenge. I love that.
Thank you so much, both of you. You have been so gracious and kind to share your expertise and your time amidst your busy schedule. Thank you very much. I think this has been a very helpful webinar to our participants. We'll post this on YouTube and to our website, and as many people can view this. Still the content, right? We want to share God's message to our people, message of hope, and we can do it through print, through ebook, through audiobook. And the future is as Cory said, more and more people will consume different formats of the content into the future. Thank you so much, and thank you all. Thank you again, Carlo, and thank you, Cory.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you to all of our participants. I invite you to join us tomorrow. I think we have another webinar tomorrow hosted by MAI Africa. It's Create Your Writer Brand with Jennifer Karina of Kenya, Hankuri Tawasgaya of Nigeria, to be hosted by Kirimi Barine of Kenya. So tomorrow we have another MAI webinar. And if you have not registered yet, go to our website, litworld.org, to register, or go to the Facebook page of MAI Africa, and there's an announcement there for you to register. So thank you very much. Thank you again, Carlo and Cory.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Yes, God bless you all.